Robert Mueller has submitted his report on the Russian
Bob Mueller has submitted his report to the Attorney General, period.
The road to the Mueller report goes back to the 2016 presidential campaign and to Russia.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to...
Evidence of Russian interference had sparked a secret FBI investigation that followed Trump into the White House.
The very inauguration of President Trump, poses challenges to the FBI because they have investigations on Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman, Carter Page, foreign policy advisor to the president's campaign, George Papadopoulos, a foreign policy advisor to the campaign, and Michael Flynn, the national security advisor. And so, these are 4 people in the national security space who are all under FBI investigation.
Within the first week of Trump's presidency, FBI Director James Comey received a phone call.
Surprise call from the president. Want to come over for dinner, Jim? And Comey says, yeah, sure, Mr. President.
When he arrived at the White House for dinner, Comey discovered the table had been set for 2.
2. Nobody else is going to be there. He and the president.
Suspicious of the president's motives for the meeting, Comey would type a record of the conversation.
We sat facing each other at a small oval table set for 2 and placed in the center of the room.
Comey says the president had very nice words for him, and so it's this pleasant conversation. And then the president says, "Can I expect loyalty from you?"
He needed loyalty and expected loyalty. I did not reply or even nod or change my facial expression.
The president would ask for Comey's loyalty several times during the dinner.
It's a remarkable moment. A president demanding loyalty of an FBI director.
He then returned to loyalty, saying, "I need loyalty." I replied that he would always get honesty from me.
In the eyes of the White House, President Trump was feeling out Comey about where the investigation stood, how he was going to handle it. Comey saw it as intimidation, possible obstruction of justice. This is the moment where things really start to split.
Russia has come up again and again in this case.
At the FBI, one of its investigations into National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was picking up speed. Intelligence agencies had intercepted a phone call between Flynn and the Russian ambassador, and then Flynn had lied to the FBI about it.
He dissembles. He suggests that he did not have such conversations with the Russian ambassador.
Court documents detail what happened.
Flynn falsely stated that he did not ask Russia's ambassador to refrain from escalating the situation in response to sanctions.
25 days on the job, embattled national security
Flynn
advisor
was forced to resign.
Shake up for the Trump administration.
A tumultuous first month in office,
But he was still in jeopardy from the investigation. Now the president took an extraordinary step.
On Valentine's Day, 2017, there was a meeting in the Oval Office between the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI, Jim Comey.
As the meeting ended, the president wanted to speak to the FBI director alone.
So he finally gets the 2 of them, just the 2 of them in the room, and then proceeds to get to work on the Michael Flynn issue.
He began by saying he wanted to talk about Mike Flynn.
Saying, can you just kind of ease up on him? He's a really good guy.
I hope you can let this go. I replied by saying, I agree he is a good guy, but said no more.
Is the president asking the FBI director to stop looking at Russian interactions with the campaign? Is he trying to shut down a counterintelligence probe that began in July of 2016?
Trump's talking to the director of the FBI about an ongoing investigation by the FBI. And at that point, he's really, from Comey's perspective, crossed the line.
It's really in direct contravention of policies that have been in place ever since Watergate to not have that type of interference by the White House in investigations undertaken by the department or the Bureau.
Jim called me shortly after he left the White House, and I remember just listening to the details of that meeting and really being in a state of shock. That's when I realized that this was not simply a lack of sophistication or a lack of understanding about how we do our work. It was an active effort to influence what we were doing.
Comey typed his notes of the meeting on his FBI laptop.
Comey begins opening his laptop and typing down the words, the phrases that he can remember the president said, because he's that scared of what this is that has just happened.
There's an old adage in the organization that if it happened and you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. And so I think that he was thinking at that time that, the president's at least walking himself down this trail to an investigation where he could become subject to investigation, and I need to be able to document what has happened.
For the first time, FBI Director James Comey will reveal
Comey didn't back
what his
down.
agency has learned.
Comey will be appearing before a House Intelligence Committee.
In fact, he went public. In testimony before
Tell
Congress,
you what he knows. It's all public on live television, no filters.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Schiff, members of the committee, thank you for including me in today's hearing. I'm honored to be here representing the people of the FBI. I have been authorized by the Department of Justice
and he says, I have been authorized by the Department of Justice, to confirm. And it kind of all heads turn to the television in every newsroom in America. And we're saying, is Comey going to confirm on the record that they're investigating the Trump campaign?
that the FBI, as part of our counterintelligence mission, is investigating the nature of any links between individuals associated with the Trump campaign and the Russian government, and whether there was any coordination between the campaign and Russia's.
He confirms this in front of these lawmakers, and that's kind of a big moment. Suddenly we're off to the races. This is now, to Trump's mind, a direct and public threat to his presidency.
I just want to make sure we get this on the record. Do you have any evidence that any current Trump White House or administration official coordinated with the Russian intelligence services?
Not a question I can answer.
That was the death knell, at least as we understand the president's thinking. Once he heard and saw that, because apparently he was watching, that was, at least in his mind, that was the end of Jim Comey.
The head of the FBI dropped 2 bombshells landing at the White House doorstep.
Comey publicly confirming for the first time that the FBI is...
As the headlines got worse, and under pressure from Comey, Trump left Washington. He headed for his country club in Bedminster, New Jersey.
It's a sort of rainy weekend in Bedminster. So Donald Trump is supposed to be out golfing. He's stuck inside. He's in a sort of foul mood anyway.
The president was frustrated. His family was frustrated. They felt like they were being swept into this riptide of an investigation, and they thought if they could just pluck Comey out, that maybe the investigation could end.
Also, new whirlwind developments are reported.
In Bedminster, on that rainy weekend, without any of his most senior staff members present, Donald Trump would make the most consequential decision of his first year in office.
Trump comes to the conclusion that I can't put up with this anymore. I'm going to fire Jim Comey. There's no consultation. There's just gut instinct and raw anger.
Trump dictated a letter to Comey.
It is a rant, the original draft. Nobody's original draft is that great, but this draft is Donald Trump unloading all of the reasons that Comey has failed him.
On Sunday, Donald Trump returned to Washington with the letter, determined to carry out his plan to stop Jim Comey once and for all.
Comey has been indicating that he knows so much more than he's letting on, and he's
Comey opens up another investigation into...
Comey isn't backing down. He said he wouldn't do anything.
An active part of an FBI investigation was there collusion between Trump associates.
The next morning in the West Wing, the word was out. Trump was preparing to take the fateful step of sending the letter.
Word gets back to Don McGahn, the White House counsel, that this document has been prepared, and he freaks out.
Our understanding is that Don McGahn reads that and says, yeah, you don't want to send that.
Even Trump's abrasive advisor, Steve Bannon, was stunned.
Of all people, Steve Bannon is the one in the room who's saying, you can't get rid of this guy, Jim Comey. This would be a terrible, terrible mistake. It's going to cause a firestorm.
Just play it out. If you do this, it's going to create a firestorm. The FBI institutionally has to bleed you out. You just can't, they're not going to allow somebody to fire and humiliate the head of the FBI. and we're going to get a special counsel on top of it.
The White House counsel had a plan that might soften the blow.
McGahn had separately learned that Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, also had concerns with Jim Comey. And he brokers this deal. So he basically says to the president, Mr. President, you don't need to send that. You should really talk to Rod Rosenstein.
They set up a meeting between Rosenstein, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and the president.
The president lets them know he wants to fire James Comey, that's clear, and the directive for Sessions and Rosenstein is to draw up the rationale, to write memos explaining why they believe Comey had made mistakes on the job and deserved to be fired.
They had their orders. Rosenstein would build a case against Jim Comey's handling of the FBI.
Rod Rosenstein is a guy who served 27 years in the Justice Department, a Boy Scout. He looks like a Boy Scout, and he thinks that Comey has violated the Justice Department norms by talking too much about Hillary Clinton during the election.
The president wanted the memo as soon as possible. It was a rush job. Rosenstein delivered it the next day.
Rod Rosenstein's memo echoed what a lot of the Hillary Clinton campaign people had been saying for months. That Comey had inserted himself into the election, he made himself too public, he had taken on a role that did not really belong to him.
The director ignored another long-standing principle. We do not hold press conferences to release derogatory information about the subject of a declined criminal investigation.
Trump doesn't care about what Comey did to hurt Hillary Clinton, but it becomes the excuse, or at least the initial excuse the White House uses to explain why they were firing the FBI director.
Donald Trump had fired hundreds of people face-to-face on The Apprentice. This time, as president, it would be different.
He just decides to do it. Trump isn't going to deliver the message himself. He sends his longtime bodyguard in a White House car with the pink slip over to the FBI to deliver the bad news.
Keith Schiller, the president's body man, can't get into the FBI. The FBI is not a place you can just walk in and be like, I have a note for Comey. I'm from the White House. Great, you're from the White House. Super. You can't come in here.
He dropped off the letter and left.
Breaking news, James Comey has been removed from heading the
Attorney General looked at me and said, I don't know if you've heard, but we've had to fire the director of the FBI. It was completely disorienting, kind of in the blink of an eye. I immediately sensed that everything had changed. So I just looked at the Attorney General and I said, no, sir, I hadn't heard that.
As the news broke, a political firestorm erupted in
mounting
Washington.
outrage on Capitol Hill, some lawmakers are questioning the country's
comes on the heels of what many saw as devastating testimony just last
Inside the White House, crisis.
Hope Hicks bursts in the door and says the president is watching TV, he's watching the coverage of the Comey firing, and there's no one out there to defend him. You guys aren't doing anything to fix this.
The White House is not interested in getting to the bottom of this.
At first, the White House's response was to point to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein.
Deputy Attorney General is a gentleman by the name of Rod Rosenstein. He made a determination that the FBI director had lost his confidence.
The message from the White House is, we fired Comey because he botched the Hillary Clinton investigation, period.
You know, to those who say, why now? Why fire James Comey now? What do you say?
Well, I would point them to the 3 letters that were received today. Anderson, the letter by President Donald Trump, the letter by Attorney General Sessions, and really the underlying report by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who the FBI director reports to.
All the people spinning on behalf of the White House told the press that the Comey firing was based on a memo from Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, which had to do with Comey's performance in the Hillary Clinton investigation. Well, the press wasn't buying that.
Right, but most of this letter focuses on Hillary Clinton's emails. This is stuff that, as a candidate, Donald Trump praised James Comey for. James Comey, Donald Trump talked about this.
Many questioning if Comey was fired because the White House feared
The next morning, the president would celebrate Comey's firing behind closed doors with 2 unlikely White House guests, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Ambassador Sergei Kislyak.
Just ahead of today's meeting with the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov.
The president will meet with Sergei Lavrov
That
in the Oval
meeting.
Office.
He is the highest-ranking Russian official that the president has met so far.
In a way, it's like a play. You can't believe it really happened. But the president is essentially celebrating with the Russian diplomats.
Well, one day after firing the man heading that probe into the Trump campaign ties to Russia, the president...
No U.S.-based reporters, no American White House reporters are in the room.
Russians came in with a photographer from their state media agency, TASS, who took photos of this event, photos that were used to some effect in Russia as propaganda.
Terrible. Terrible optics. It just... You couldn't have scripted it worse.
Trump says, we're going to have a great relationship. There's this investigation. It's just become a total irritant for me. And he says, Comey's firing lifted a great weight for me. The guy was a nut job.
James Comey, first the firing, now the fallout.
The crisis kept building.
Some are comparing Comey's firing to Richard Nixon's 1973 Saturday Night
President
Massacre.
Trump now facing outrage after firing Comey.
It is hard to overstate the
Then
sheer
the president
magnitude
decided to
of
speak out himself on his old network.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Tonight, stunning revelations from President Trump in our NBC News exclusive interview. Tonight, our wide-ranging...
Monday, you met with the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein.
Right.
Did you ask for a recommendation?
What I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision. It was not...
You had made the decision before they came in the room.
I was going to fire Comey.
It is a dramatic moment to see the president come out and not only completely undermine the case that his White House had been making. As spurious a case and as transparent as a case it was, it still had been the official line. The president comes out and demolishes that case immediately.
So you had already made the decision.
I was going to fire regardless of recommendation.
So there was I think there's a level on which President Trump doesn't want to be portrayed as just doing the bidding of some aides who write a memo. He's the decider, to coin a phrase.
In fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won.
You know, the thing with Donald Trump is he often says what he believes, and if you just wait long enough, he'll tell you the truth. I mean, he'll say it.
It is the interview that will likely dominate
The interview backfired.
comments to contradict the White House previous statements.
Admitting Russia was on his mind.
At the FBI, Acting Director Andrew McCabe wondered whether the president had fired Comey to shut down the Russia investigation.
One possibility would be that that president, who did not want that issue investigated by the FBI, was in fact in league with or influenced by the Russian government. And that is an unbelievably significant concern.
McCabe informed Rosenstein that the FBI wanted to investigate the President of the United States.
I alerted Rod to the fact that my investigators had recommended opening a case on the President of the United States for both possibility of obstruction of justice and the possibility of national security threat.
Rosenstein made a decision to appoint a special counsel to oversee the investigation.
Rosenstein said, I need someone to not only stabilize the investigation, I need to stabilize the Department of Justice. It had been under siege from President Trump, from public scrutiny.
He named one of the nation's legendary prosecutors, former FBI Director Robert S. Mueller III. Mueller had a lifetime of preparation for this moment.
He volunteered to serve in Vietnam as a United States Marine, highly decorated, wounded in action.
In the 90s, Mueller had tried his hand in the private sector at a prestigious law firm. He hated it.
$400,000 a year. He felt like he wasn't doing the Lord's work. He quit.
He took a substantial pay cut to become a line prosecutor. He worked homicide in Washington, D.C.
His great joy was putting away bad guys and answering his phone, Mueller, homicide.
Bob Mueller cares about one thing, and one thing only, indicting bad guys and putting them in prison.
A Republican, he'd run the FBI for both George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Pulled out of private practice, Robert Mueller was back at the center of the action.
We begin with breaking news. The White House in crisis. The Justice Department appointed a special counsel to
This is a guy who has no problem with holding people accountable, being direct and driven to get the answer. He's going to do it right, you know, in accordance with the rule of law. That's all that matters.
If you're in the West Wing and Bob Mueller's on your trail, should you be worried?
You should be afraid. You should be very afraid.
Justice Department tonight naming special counsel to take over the investigation.
He was announced as special counsel, and I just go, oh my God, this is going to be a grind, because this is a guy that doesn't leave any stone unturned. I mean, now we've bought it.
That Mueller could expand the probe to include Attorney General
At the White
Jeff Sessions
House,
and Deputy Attorney General
the
Rob
president
Rosenstein.
happened to be meeting with Attorney General Jeff Sessions when Rosenstein called to announce Mueller's appointment.
President Trump doesn't like to get bad news, and this was bad news. It was more than bad news, it was terrible news.
And now you see him really unleash all his anger on Jeff Sessions and plainly tells Jeff Sessions that you are the reason why all of this is happening.
Sessions, Trump's hand-picked attorney general, had recused himself from the Russia investigation. And now Sessions was powerless to stop Mueller.
Trump was furious and took it out on Sessions and humiliated him. Trump obviously felt himself endangered by a special counsel and lost his temper.
There are things that Jeff Sessions apparently won't do for Donald Trump, and Donald Trump won't forgive him for that.
Sessions had had enough of the president's anger.
Sessions just ends up bolting out of the White House, rushing out to his car. He said, if you want me to quit, I'm going to quit.
He's resigning as Attorney General. He's distraught, and he's had it. He's at the end of his rope. He's been insulted by Trump. He's decided that that's it.
In the West Wing, all hell broke loose.
Don McGahn, the legal counsel, bursts into Reince Priebus's office and says, we've got trouble. Not only do we have a special counsel appointed, but Jeff Sessions has just resigned. Priebus says, you're kidding me. Priebus goes running down the staircase into the West Wing parking lot.
Finds Sessions in his car preparing to leave, and he bangs on the door. You got to come out. You got to come back in. You can't leave this way. It can't just blow up like this.
And Priebus essentially almost has to drag him back up into the West Wing, where Vice President Pence and Steve Bannon then come in and join Priebus and talk Sessions off the ledge.
I said, is there any doubt in your mind that this was divine providence that put us here? He says, no doubt. I said, and you're never going to quit. He says, I will never quit. I go, no matter how bad it gets, because I'll never quit. And that's why I knew he was going to hang in there. And he had some very, very, very tough days.